Okay, I guess we'll start. So, good morning again, everyone. So, last class we were looking at this cloverleaf model of transfer RNA. So, we had looked at the structure of messenger RNA, which had different components, including the methylated guanine, phosphate moiety, 5' untranslated region, then the starting codon, which was always ATG, coding region, and the stop site, that is the either of these UAA, UAG or UGA codons, then 3' untranslated region and the polyadenine tail on the 3' end. So that was the structure of mRNA which we had looked at. And then we were looking at the cloverleaf model where we had looked at that there is amino acid arm. So that means there is the stem of 7 base pairs which will possess on one side it will be the 5' end, on the other side it will be 3' end, and the 3' terminus will have CAA which will be attached to a specific moiety. So this is what was the 3' end with CCA, and it will be attachment site or it will be attached to a particular amino acid for which this anticodon will be coding for. So that was one thing, that was one arm of the tRNA model. Second one that we had looked at was the dihydroxyuridine arm, DH, which has stem of 4 base pair, and then it ends up looping containing modified dihydroxyuridine. And this is usually the enzyme recognition site during the activation of the amino acid activating enzyme. That means it will be related to specific amino acid when they have to bind it together. Let's say, for example, lysine or leucine and isoleucine, any of these two amino acid out of those 21 or 20, they will have to bind. So the enzyme has to be specific, and that will be dependent on the whole structure of tRNA. So that is dihydroxyuridine. So again, in the structure, this is the 4 base pair stem and then looping of this modified dihydroxyuridine bases. And there are 8 to 12 of these in this circle or in this loop, and there are 4 of them in the stem. And like I said, this amino acid will be specific to the code or the anticodon which is complementary to the code on the mRNA. Similarly, the same amino acid will be carried same tRNA will be carrying the enzyme binding site for this particular amino acid to the another one. So it is usually the CONH bond, what we call as peptide bond or amide bond. So that way, this amino acid will be binding to the enzyme which will be recognized by this particular DHU arm loop. Then the third one we had just looked at in brief, that was the anticodon arm. So it lies opposite to the acceptor arm, and it has a particular anticodon, right? So acceptor arm, which has a stem of 5 base pair with pseudouridine. Pseudouridine, I have picture somewhere. It has, yeah, this is the pseudouridine. We know uridine usually looks like this. This is the uridine base pair, and thymine has this CH3 on this 5th carbon atom. Uridine has the numbering change. You can see on first carbon, the sugar moiety is attached. Sorry, first nitrogen, not carbon. First nitrogen, the sugar moiety is attached in the regular uridine. And pseudouridine has the same molecule of uracil, and it is attached on the 5th carbon. So from nitrogen, first nitrogen, the sugar molecule is attached to the 5th carbon, and that is, this reaction is catalyzed by the pseudouridine synthase, and that is the this anticodon arm. So these base pairs that you see in dark blue here, they are made up of this pseudouridine. So here also This one is the anticodon arm, and they are made up of pseudouridine base pair, and then there is a loop which has anticodon as well. So the loop has a definite sequence of 3 nitrogenous bases complementary to some triplet codon on mRNA, and this sequence is called as anticodon. So now if you go by logic, and if I ask you a question that what would be anticodon similar to, if you read in terms of letters of anticodon, which strand of DNA it will match to, 5 prime to 3 prime or 3 prime to 5 prime? What do you think? I hope you got the question. So like we have a codon, we have a codon on mRNA, we have anticodon on tRNA. mRNA matches with certain strand of DNA, right? Then anticodon will match with to which strand of DNA? 5 prime to 3 prime or 3 prime to 5 prime? People, what do you think? Which one was the sense strand, which one was the anti-sense strand or template strand? So, Mansi, what do you think? Mansi, Akshay.
5 prime to 3 prime.
So you mean anticodon will have same reading sequence as that of 5 prime to 3 prime?
Yeah, I'm guessing.
Pratham?
Yeah, sir. Even I think 5 prime to 3 prime.
Okay, so that's correct. And why would you say so? Anyone?
So, because 5 prime to 3 prime is the coding strand.
Correct.
And so the code that's in the mRNA is exactly the same as that.
Right. So, and that is when anticodon will be opposite. That is?
Yeah.
Perfect. So that means we have clarity on this particular part. So these kind of questions can be asked again in the MCQ type of exam, because that is.
So, but wouldn't that imply that this would be 3 prime to 5 prime then?
What?
The anticodon, like the anticodon, yeah.
So that's what you said, right?
No. I think we said 5 prime to 3 prime.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then my processing also went wrong. So 5 prime to 3 prime is our anti-sense strand, right? And 3 prime to 5 prime is a template strand. Now we want, so let me go back to that slide because that will create a better imagination. Where is it? Somewhere here. Yes, here. So 5 prime to 3 prime is our coding strand, and this is the template strand. So template strand is required so that the mRNA is synthesized, which is exactly like 5 prime to 3 prime, right? So that means mRNA is also 5 prime to 3 prime, right? And that way, if there is anticodon, it will be like 3 prime to 5 prime. Yeah, so I hope this part is clear. Yeah, so it will be like a template strand because it is complementary to the coding strand, and we want coding strand as a part of DNA as well as the mRNA in the codon strand. So I hope this part is clear. If I misinterpreted it, please ignore that part. Where is it? Okay, so that is the anticodon arm, which has 5 base pairs in this stain of pseudouridine, and it has a loop with the 3 nitrogenous bases specific to a particular amino acid, and it is called as anticodon.
Sir,
Yes.
what's the difference between uracil and uridine?
Uracil is just this molecule, and this is a nucleoside. That is what is uridine.
Okay. So when you attach it to the nucleoside, it becomes uridine.
Correct. And then, so I guess you were absent during that class, as far as I remember, because this is where it is. These are nucleosides. Where is it? Yeah, you can see this: uridine, uracil plus ribose. Yeah, you can just go over these slides later, so you will have that in your head.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that is the anticodon arm. Now the first nucleotide, that means the first in that sequence of anticodon, is a vowel base of either inosine, or this symbol is called as psi, right? Which ultimately refers to pseudouridine. That is the symbol for pseudouridine. Like adenine has A, guanine has G. Pseudouridine has this psi symbol, and inosine, which is another nucleotide. I don't know. Let me show you the inosine as well, so that inosine nucleotide, this is also one of the purine nucleotide, right? Otherwise most of the, like, I don't know if they have structure here, adenosine, inosine. Yeah, you can see here adenosine has this NH2 and inosine has this double bond O. So that is like kind of a difference between two. It is still a purine base. So that way, this first nucleotide of the anticodon is a vowel base pair. It can be either inosine or it can be either pseudouridine. So vowel means, where is it? This one, the first base pair, it can be out of this A, G, C, U, or it can also be inosine or pseudouridine. And there are reasons why it is called so, because vowel, that means it is not fixed. So I don't know if I can get those diagrams of vowel phenomena. So yeah, this is normal pairing, vowel pairing. Yeah, so there is a particular anticodon and it will connect to this, and it can also connect, you can see GAG is same, but it can also connect to CUU. That means the last base pair. Now it depends on, now you don't get confused between 5' and 3'. This vowel base pair is always on the 5' end, and that is when I showed you in the diagram here, this was on this side. Yeah, because the diagram is kind of mirror image. So always on the 5' end, this last base pair of the anticodon is the vowel nucleotide, and that is what is being shown here. This is the 5' end, 5' end. So the last nucleotide, it can recognize any of these sequence. So G can also bind to C, G can also bind to U, and this is what is vowel pairing. And the reason for that to happen is because of the hydrogen bonding phenomena. We will talk about this a little more in detail when it comes to the protein synthesis part. There we have this detailed process, but as of now, just to make a kind of statement, that the last base pair is called as vowel because it can connect to any other. And that is when we had looked at this amino acid chart, and we had discussed this as well. Let's say for simpler example, okay, this is looking better, I guess. Open image in the new tab. So when we look at this particular base pair, you can see in most of the cases the last nucleotide is changing, but still the amino acid remains same. Here also, this is threonine, THR, AC, 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 and UCAG. Even the last base pair is changing. The amino acid is still same. This is exactly called as vowel phenomena. So that is what we will study when we look at the protein synthesis part. So that is the last nucleotide is the vowel base pair. It can also be inosine and pseudouridine, which can pair up with more than one base in the corresponding codon position on mRNA. So
does it have to be inosine and pseudouridine, or it can be that, or it can be the the normal base pair?
It can be any of these.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be a wobble base pair. It can be a wobble base pair.
Ha, correct.
Okay.
But that phenomena of even like if you have seen that diagram when I was showing, guanine can connect with cytosine, which is its natural complementary pair, but guanine was also able to pair with uracil. Not literally pair, but they form certain hydrogen bond, and it need not be again 2 or 3 hydrogen bond. It can be sometimes different, like a single hydrogen bond, but that still gives a kind of pairing between those two
Sir,
nucleotides.
but
Yes.
but how can two pyridines or two pyrimidines form, like two purines or pyrimidines form a hydrogen bond? Because like it's not oriented the same way, so they don't have like electronegative and hydrogen on the same, like they don't have it.
No. So again, so what you are imagining is the same situation we had discussed earlier. That does not apply anymore here, right? The conformation of this molecule in the tRNA would be different, right? And the
No
reason
sir,
being,
like it's not about conformation. It's like it doesn't have a hydrogen to begin with. Like if both of them don't have hydrogen sticking out, then they can't form base pairs, right?
which
Like
does
they can't
have
form a bond.
hydrogen?
It's like sir, like there's a purine and there's a pyrimidine.
Huh?
So like a purine has hydrogens sticking out and the pyrimidine has an oxygen, let's say. So they form a bond. But if both have oxygen or both only have hydrogen, then there won't be a bond, right?
No, but that is never the case. No, in each and every case, like for example, this is pseudouridine, right? It has this oxygen protruding out. So, and purine has hydrogen protruding out from this. So they will ultimately have certain hydrogen bonding between them. Correct, no? Or even these hydrogen and the NH or NH2, whichever is of particular nucleotide, they will form hydrogen bonding.
Okay, so the structure is changed a bit so that there are excess hydrogens or electronegative molecules sticking out.
Structure is not changed. Like I said, here just the positioning, for example, specific of pseudouridine, only the position of attachment to the sugar moiety has changed. That's what makes it pseudouridine, right? Now, when this is pseudouridine like molecule, it obviously has these 4 groups where there is a possibility that it can make the hydrogen bonds, right, to the neighboring whichever purine atom it is. Correct, no?
Well, yeah.
So and again, it is not, it has, that is when I said it need not be in double helical structure. What was the constraint? The gap between 2 strand was only 20 nanometer, right? So there the possibility of having random combination was very less. But here we have seen this structure of tRNA itself is more flexible, right? So that is when the last base pair which is there can be a little different, and that is why the wobble phenomena exists because of the structural differences. Otherwise that would have been possible even in the DNA structure, but DNA is more rigid and more rigid in the sense like structurally rigid, right? So that way there is no chance of forming any other hydrogen bonding. Otherwise, even if some amino acid, let's say pyrimidine and pyrimidine, they are able to form one hydrogen bond, that should have been okay with the DNA helix, but that is not the case. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, so that is the wobble phenomena, which again, like I said, we will discuss it later one more time during protein synthesis. Now, the anticodon reads its appropriate codon on mRNA and temporarily binds it. Remember, this is a very temporary binding because that codon and anticodon, once they match, it is not like bond formation completely. It is temporary bonding, can be hydrogen bonding. I'm not sure of it exactly, but I assume it would be hydrogen bonding, because again, these are the base pairs. And therefore, the terminal end of this arm is called as recognition end. That means the anticodon arm is also called as recognition end. So it has then quite a few names. This is the anticodon arm, or it's also called as terminal arm, or what was the other name? Recognition end. So
So
yes.
like I just had a clarification that I wanted to ask. So the distance between the two nitrogenous, like two base pairs, is much smaller than the one that's present in DNA. So even like purines or pyrimidines can form bonds.
Correct.
So, but then even in the other two base pairs, the first and the second one, the distance should remain the same. So then even they can form base pairs with like hydrogen bonds with any random ones, right?
Are you talking of DNA?
No, sir. Like
This tRNA?
yes, sir. The interaction between tRNA and mRNA.
Yes, but that is when the structural aspect of the tRNA comes into picture, right? The last base pair is kind of oval because of the structural formation of the tRNA, right? Again, if we look at the three-dimensional structure, that is when, sorry, that is when this last base pair will have certain space to move around a bit. But the first two, they are relatively rigid because they are part of the loop. And this is towards the end of the loop, right? In this two-dimensional view, it may not be so apparent, but like maybe I will show you the actual three-dimensional diagram of the tRNA. If at all I find that picture or video model, there this thing will get clear. But as of now, let's leave that part of the oval phenomenon, because we will discuss it for sure during protein synthesis, because there we have to talk of how the tRNA will bring amino acid, how it will bind to mRNA, then what happens to the next mRNA sequence and so on. So we'll talk about all these things again. Where were we? Yeah. So that is the recognition end or anticodon arm. Now there is this T psi C arm. You remember this psi was the phenomena, the symbol for the pseudouridine. So this is thymine, pseudouridine, and the cytosine arm. It has a site for attachment to a ribosome. Now ribosome is a protein. Proteins have quite a lot of sites for attachment of this tRNA, so that a specific tRNA comes, it will drop that particular amino acid, and then the enzyme will do its function. It will attach to the amino acid change and so on. But for that, the tRNA molecule has to be relatively stable in the ribosomal structure, that ribosomal complex. And that's why it has to have a site for attachment to a ribosome, and that is present with these three nucleotides. And again, it has a 5 base pair long stem, contains a nucleotides, that is T, ribothymidine, pseudouridine, you can also say thymidine, and cytidine, right? So that way, this T, psi, and C, that sequence is present in this arm as well. So this is the T psi C loop, right? It has this arm, or you can call it as a stem. We will talk about this variable even later. As of now, we skip that part. But there is this arm, and then there is the loop, which has this T psi C nucleotide base specifically on the 3' end. Yeah, 3' end as in on the 3' end side. Again, we cannot exchange this DHU arm with this T psi C arm, right? So they have to be, one has to be on the 5' end, which is DHU arm, and the other one has to be on this for 3' end, that is thymine, pseudouridine, and the cytidine arm. So that is the site of attachment for the ribosome. Again, in this case, this was just shown in different colors so that it becomes more clear which base pairs are we talking about, but you can have a look at it later. This part which is mentioning here, like for example, pink is 97% conserved, and this yellow which is 45% conserved. So variable region means depending on type of the tRNA, depending on type of the organism, these nucleotide base sequence can be different, and that is one of the signature for a species as well. Like if you want to identify human tRNA and let's say mice tRNA or any other fish tRNA and so on, different species, right? This tRNA will be different for different species. But if you talk about this pink part of the tRNA, it is 97% conserved. That means 97% of that particular tRNA sequence will be matching with different species, right? Similarly, the conservation pattern is given being here, and this is kind of evolutionarily related. That means through the process of not revolution, evolution, the particular sequence of nucleotide has been passing on from different species as they are getting evolved from the common ancestor, and that is why there is this conservation. And that is what is the variable region as well. Like I said, it is different in different species, can be around 3 to 23 nucleotide base pair. In some species, this can be higher, some species can be lower in terms of number, and that is why it is a variable region. So that is the fifth arm, or that is also called as fifth arm within the tRNA, but we will only restrict to the 4-arm. This acceptor arm or the amino acid arm, then DHU arm or DHU loop, then anticodon arm or the recognition end, and the finally ribosomal attachment site, which is also called a T-Cy-C loop. So these are the 4 main parts of this tRNA structure. Now, one interesting fact is the modified bases present in tRNA, they are formed by the methylation of normal 4 bases, right? For example, inosine is derived from adenine, and pseudouridine and dihydroxyuridine from uracil. So inosine, like we have seen in that structure, is just a different version of adenine, and these two, that is pseudouridine and dihydroxyuridine, these are modified forms of the uracil, right? So depending on what modification it is, not necessarily always it is methylation, it can be hydroxylation, it can be changing in the like for example in the pseudouridine, that binding carbon atom itself changes, right? So that way these are just modified in terms of some or the other aspect, and they are present in the tRNA molecule, and that is how tRNA is relatively a special nucleotide strand, because it has quite a lot of modified base pair. While in case of DNA and mRNA, this has our regular nucleotides, like let's say adenine, guanine, thymine and cytosine, and if it is mRNA, it will be uracil. So that way, all the mRNA and DNA molecule will have regular nucleotides, while the tRNA will have quite a lot of them modified, and this is specifically because of different arms. They are like in need of those attachment because of the structural aspect of the tRNA, and also something related to the binding of this tRNA during the protein synthesis process. Okay, any question anyone here so far? Did you get time to watch this video? If not, we can watch it now, or if you say that we will watch it together, I am fine with that also. What do you want to do? It's hardly a 2 minute. I guess let's watch it. No subtitles.
Describe the structure of tRNA. The tRNA has a clover leaf-like structure. It is synthesized in the nucleus on a small part of DNA. In 1965, R.W. Hawley suggested the cloverleaf model of tRNA. Though tRNA molecule consists of a single strand, it assumes cloverleaf-like structure through folding. There are 3 folds in the cloverleaf tRNA. It has 4 arms, namely anticodon arm, D arm, TC arm, and amino acid acceptor arm. The tRNA molecules are made up of 73 to 93 ribonucleotides. The acceptor arm carries an amino acid. The anticodon arm has 3 anticodon nucleotides, which will join with the complementary codon in mRNA during protein synthesis. That is, 3 nucleotides in the tRNA pairs with 3 nucleotides of mRNA. In certain tRNAs, in addition to these 4 arms, an extra arm called variable arm occurs as shown in the figure. The amino acid acceptor and the anticodon arms are oriented in opposite directions.
Okay, so okay, I guess this is a good revision. I will also post one more video which is related to this, like the structure of what we call as tRNA, which has even more detailed description specifically related to the variable arm and so on. Like it's not just that certain base pair has to be there, why they have to be present there, that is what should be understood, and then we will understand the structure of tRNA in a better way. Okay, so I guess that was good information for tRNA part. Now the third type of the RNA, that is ribosomal RNA. So first we looked at mRNA, second we looked at tRNA, and now the third type, that is ribosomal RNA. And if you remember the composition of the total RNA, it was 5% was the messenger RNA, which is very short-lived. Also in your textbook, there is a chart given which talks about the what we say distinguishing features of the different types of RNA. There it clearly mentioned there are the mRNA is only alive for 2 to 4 hours. That is only during the time of protein synthesis, after it has been formed from the DNA strand, and then it gets degraded immediately. While on the other hand, the tRNA and rRNA, these can stay for quite long time, even for many generations, not of the adult human, but of the cells. So that way, this tRNA molecule, they can stay there. Sorry, not only tRNA, but also the rRNA. So what is this rRNA or ribosomal RNA? So it forms a structural component of the ribosomes with greatly coiled structure. That means ribosome has certain proteins and rRNA, that is ribosomal RNA, and together these structures, that is proteins as well as rRNA, they will form ribosomes. Now in combination with proteins, these form the small and large subunits of ribosome. Now it has to have specific these 2 separate subunits because it is the requirement of the protein synthesis process. Again, we will talk about that part in detail while we look at the process. rRNA constitutes about 80% of the total RNA of the cell. 10 to 15% was tRNA, 5% was mRNA. So the remaining is all rRNA. So that is like a huge amount of ribosomal RNA present in a particular cell. Eukaryotic ribosome is ATS. Now this ATS, again, if you remember, we had this discussion on the sedimentation coefficient. So this ATS is coming from that sedimentation coefficient. So it has that much of the sedimentation coefficient, that is 80. There was this name of the guy on which this S is coming. I forgot the name though. Maybe I'll remember it later. So this eukaryotic ribosome in like human cell, for example, the ribosome, it is of 80S type, which has 60S subunit, and it has 40S smaller subunit. So 60S will consist of different small components like 20S, 5.8S, and 5S RNA. Again, these are RNAs in this ribosomal subunit, while the 40S subunit will comprise of 80S RNA. Again, that means it will have sedimentation coefficient of 80, and these will have those respective sedimentation coefficient. So that way, eukaryotic ribosome is 80S divided into 60 plus 40S, and then they will have certain RNA with specific sedimentation coefficient.
Sir,
Yes,
so the larger the sedimentation coefficient, the faster it
precipitates.
sediment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in case of prokaryotic, the or even the mitochondrial ribosome, because mitochondria has its own DNA, so it also has its own like protein synthesis assembly, including ribosome. So both of these, they have 70S ribosome. So yeah, 70S ribosome, which has 50S larger subunit and 30S smaller subunit. And again, it has different types of rRNA present in them, like 23S and 5S in the larger subunit of prokaryote, and 30S will have 16S RNA. Now, I don't know how much you have to remember these small components, but it would be best if you make some analogy and try and remember this. Otherwise, what is most important is 80S divided into 60S and 40S, and 70S in prokaryote divided into 50S and 30S. That is the major ribosomal subunits that you need to remember for sure. So the DNA sequence encoding rRNA, these are called as rDNA. So we know like messenger RNA is synthesized from the template strand. Similarly, there will be certain other DNA sequences apart from the coding strands, or what we call as template strand or sense strand or antisense strand, whatever they are, whether 5' to 3' or 3' to 5'. But during the whole of the DNA molecule, certain sequences out of this coding part, not of the coded genes, but apart from the gene structures, they will be responsible for encoding rRNA molecules. That means from those DNA molecules or stretches of DNA, rRNA will be synthesized, and they are clustered in one or more nucleoli. Now, not nucleoli does not mean it has a separate structure within the whole of the chromosomal or genetic material, but within the same genetic material, they are clustered together. That means they are present in sequence very close to each other. So that is what is the cluster. So the part of the chromosome containing rDNA is called as nucleolar organizer, because it ultimately organizes the ribosomes and so on. So that is why, and it is present in the nucleoli or nucleolus. So that is why it is called as nucleolar organizer. Now, in bacteria, about 10 to 20 cistrons, they are associated with rRNA. Now, cistron, if you remember, it was cluster of genes. So that means a particular cluster of genes which is going to synthesize rRNA, they are present in bacteria. And in eukaryotes, this number is quite high, almost 210 to 2100 tightly clustered rRNA or rDNA cistrons, and showing the tandem arrangement which are involved in the rRNA synthesis. Tandem arrangement means they have a specific arrangement of the cistron in a particular cluster, and that's how they are present. So you can look at the difference between how many genes they code for rRNA in prokaryote compared to how many genes they code for rRNA in the eukaryote. So the difference is almost, I guess, 100 to 1000 times higher. So that is the difference of this rRNA structure in prokaryote and eukaryote. Now, this display of the three-dimensional structure of the rRNA is typically due to the secondary and tertiary folding. Now we know rRNA, any type for that matter, whether it's a messenger RNA or tRNA or rRNA, it has certain two-dimensional, three-dimensional structure, right? So that is like not two-dimensional, three-dimensional, but secondary and tertiary structure, which is ultimately three-dimensional structure. And that is what is due to the folding of the strand or due to the twisting of the strand or coiling and looping and so on. So there are several of such phenomena that can happen, like DNA has specifically double helical structure. So RNA does not have that. So depending on whether it is getting folded or twisted or coiled or looped, that is what will decide the three-dimensional structure of this RNA molecule, and that is present in most of these types of RNA. I guess, yeah. So that is all about the rRNA. Functional aspect, it will come more into while we talk of, or I assume that you might have studied the function of rRNA during ribosome. If not, we will look at that particular part during the protein synthesis function. But structurally, I hope everyone is clear with this. 950. Okay, so we will move on and we will just try to finish this other additional forms of RNA. So there is this something called as small nuclear RNA, short formed as snRNA. These are small RNA stretches of almost 100 to 250 nucleotides and found in nucleus of the eukaryotic cell. So the function is they are transcribed by either RNA polymerase 2 or 3. We will look at the difference. What is this RNA polymerase? It is actually used for the RNA synthesis. So that is what is RNA polymerase. We will just look at what are the different types, whether 1, 2, 3 or whatsoever it is. So that is these snRNAs, they are transcribed by either RNA polymerase 2 or RNA polymerase 3, and they are needed in the splicing or processing of the pre-messenger RNA. That is what we called as heteronuclear RNA in the nucleus, right? Or the heterogeneous nuclear RNA, HN nuclear, that's what it was called. Now, this splicing, if you remember when we looked at the structure of the DNA, there were certain exons and there were introns, and then there were repeated exon 1, intron 1, exon 2, intron 2, and so on. So the exons were the coding part, introns were non-coding part within the frame of DNA or within the frame of the particular gene. Now this introns, they are removed while the mRNA synthesis happens, and that function is done by this small nuclear RNA. And again, this part we will see later when we talk of splicing a bit. They are also called as uRNA. So this snRNA, they are associated with a set of specific protein because they are involved in splicing, and that's why they are associated with these proteins. And these complexes, they are called as SNRPs or snRNPs, small nuclear ribonucleotide proteins. SN, small nuclear ribonucleotide proteins, snRNP or SNRPs. SNRPs is the most commonly used terminology. So these are the small nuclear RNAs involved in splicing. So nowadays there has been quite a lot of research that is happening on this splicing. So for example, there is 1000 amino acid long protein. Now let's say a particular protein in a eukaryotic cell of a human being has 1000 amino acids, and that same protein can be available in different form, let's say 700 base pair or 500 base pair, that way, and all of them, they will function normally, but at the end, the results will be different, right? And that is what is the beauty of this protein functions or the RNA splicing, which is leading to different protein structures without damaging the function of that protein. So that is what is the splicing all the more important process to study about. So that is this NERP or the snRNA, small nuclear RNAs. Next type of RNA which is additionally present apart from all different types is the heterogeneous RNA, or it is also called as hnRNA. That's what we had looked at earlier. So it includes the RNA of various types and sizes found in the eukaryotic cell nucleus. That is what is the regular RNA. And these hrNAs, these are the pre-RNAs or newly synthesized mRNAs copied from the DNA segment. So this mRNA, that is when we had seen this terminology of hnRNA, they are called as heterogeneous RNA. Heterogeneous because they are of different sizes. One can be of 500 base pair, other can be 1000 base pair, other can be 5000 base pair, depending on what protein they are going to code for. So that way they are different. They are copied from the DNA segment of a particular cistron, and they have introns and exons, and based on their removal of the introns or splicing, that is when this snRNAs comes into picture, they will form a properly functional mRNA molecule. So that is heterogeneous RNA or hnRNA. Now again, and therefore sometimes hnRNA has the coding and non-coding segment, and then it gets spliced and then forms the functional mRNA by removing the non-coding part. So that is what is being explained here. There is something called a genetic RNA. Like we know that there are certain RNA viruses and they have RNA as their genetic material, while there is no DNA there, I mean, as a genetic material. So that's when this RNA is called as genetic RNA, and this is specifically a single-stranded in some of the viruses, while it can be double-stranded in some other types of viruses. So depend on which virus we are talking about. So simplest example that we know of is the tobacco mosaic virus or influenza virus or even coronavirus, HIV. These are all RNA viruses, and their RNA will be specifically called as genetic RNA. Enzymatic RNA, or what is also called as ribozymes. Certain RNAs, they act as a biological catalyst. That means they take part in the process of the biochemical reaction, but they don't get changed themselves. Rather, they additionally enhance the function of some biological reaction. And this would be specific to the protein synthesis function. So these are associated with the maturation of the hnRNAs. hnRNA, again the regular RNA, you can say. 23S and 28S ribosomal RNAs of the ribosome, they will catalyze the function of the peptide bond formation during synthesis of the polypeptide chain. So we had seen these two, 23S and 28S, as a part of, so the here is 23S, right? And where is this other one? Here, 28S. So these are the rRNAs, and these are specific of this ribozyme type because they are involved in the catalytic reaction of the protein synthesis. Again, now look at the correlation, right? Your tRNA molecule has this particular arm which is going to bind to the ribosomal site. That ribosome has this particular rRNAs, that is 28S and 23S, depending on prokaryote or eukaryote. And these molecules, they are ultimately going to catalyze the formation of peptide bonds. So all these three actions, they are in sync, and that is what is the ribozymes as a last type. Functions, I guess you can do it on your own. Next class, we will start directly with the process of DNA replication. So that is where the main processes we will start now. First DNA replication, then transcription, and then translation. and we will go over one by one. So you can go over this we have discussed enough in each and every category. So that way we will do it. Yeah. Do you people have any question?